the Ukrainian delegation is meeting with the U.S. Today. Let me just start off by asking you what concessions you think the U.S. team are looking for out of the Ukraine delegation, and how do you think that ties in to the conversation that President Zelensky may have had with MBS yesterday?
Yes, it's interesting. Secretary of State Marco Rubio made clear that he was basically wanting to test the waters with the Ukrainians to see what they're willing to concede in some sort of compromise deal with Russia. And that implies territorial concessions because Russian forces are occupying Ukrainian land at the present time. That's a very difficult thing for Ukraine to sign up to, but it looks like the US is pushing for some clarity on what they could tolerate and what they could agree to in return for an end to this war. So it's a pretty significant meeting today, I think.
Yeah. And in terms of what is happening with these discussions, clearly there's a lot of progress since 10 days ago when that Oval Office meeting took place between President Zelensky and President Trump. We now know that Steve Witkoff is going to be traveling to Russia, which is interesting because he's technically the Middle East envoy. What do you make of that trip?
Yeah, this is pretty significant, actually, because the last time Mr. Witkoff was in Moscow, he had 3.5 hours with President Putin. That's a very long time for a person of his rank in relation to the president. He went back to the United States, and Trump then had his phone call with Putin, and there were these series of concessions to the Russian position that we all know about, ruling out Ukrainian membership of NATO, talking about Ukrainian concessions of land in return for a peace deal. So it's pretty significant that he's there this week at the same time as the US is meeting the Ukrainians in Saudi Arabia. The pace of negotiations has really accelerated in this search for a ceasefire.
Yeah, and it seems as though the Ukrainian side are okay with the idea of a temporary truce, an air truce, a sea truce, but that is something that the Russian president objects to.
Yes, President Zelensky of Ukraine has said all along that he wants the war to stop and he wants a truce, and he's proposed an air truce and a truce in the Black Sea as a way to begin negotiations. Russia has not yet signaled that it's ready for any kind of truce except one that involves a pause when there's a framework peace agreement on the table. So it'll be interesting to see if Witkoff comes back with different impressions from President Putin. But at the moment, the Russians are holding out for a truce at a time when there's a proper framework peace deal on the table, and we're not there yet.